Hey everybody, happy Magic Monday brought to you on Tuesday.
Hi, Lorna.
How are you, Christine?
I'm doing well, thanks.
You're done with your jury duty, so we can start recording again.
Did my civic duty, yes, indeed. So, coming to you with a live question today, right?
Yeah. This has been a topic for you and I, and we got asked this, and we just thought we would talk about it today, which is this whole question about the ego and what is the ego and where does it fit into all of these other things that we're talking about all the time. And we just want to, do some clarifying stuff around that today.
Yeah. So let's understand. So when we talk about ego, first thing comes to mind is, oh, that person has such a huge ego, right? He's so or she's so egotistical.
Yes.
It's really associated with this sort of big-headedness, this arrogance, right? Feeling more superior, right? So it's really kind of a negative thing. And we want to differentiate here. We're going to go with something a little bit more in that direction versus the super classical Freudian psychoanalytical construct of ego and id and super id, and it has nothing to do with any of that.
Right. And we're not talking about that. And we're also, sometimes you hear people say, oh, you have to kill the ego, right? We're not talking about that either at all, right? We need our ego. Our ego is part of us. But the whole idea is to have the ego not be in charge of us.
Yes.
And that's really the differentiation here, and to see when it is in charge and how we can step back from that. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
So let's think about the ego as that voice inside our head. We all have one, right? Mm-hmm. That tends to be the worrier, the critical one, the one that's always, got to be super vigilant or got to be making sure that something doesn't happen or is supposed to happen a certain way, right? Someone that, always having us on guard, either trying to control something that's going to, be in the future or worrying about the past.
Right. Or it's this notion that it makes you better than others or worse than others, right? You're never the same. It's always, you have to try to be better than you are, or you're just miserable and awful and you're a terrible person. Right. This is all the way that the ego works.
Yes.
Right? And as we were saying before we started recording, it's very wily. And sometimes it can be very hard to identify because sometimes it seems like it's almost being nice to us, but it really isn't.
Right. So we talk a lot about in this work with Unlock Magic about being real, about being authentic, about leading with our best, with the intelligence of our heart, right? Getting out of our analytical thinking brain, which is very similar to actually getting out of what we want to call the ego, right? So some signs that you might be in your ego would be ones that we just mentioned. Maybe we're walking around and we're feeling so much better than we have to prove it. I'll have to be as skinny as her, and I got to drive the right car, and I got to get the right job. And if I was a perfect mom, I should be doing this, right? It's the constant comparison and judgment of others, which really is, very much an assault of judgment on ourselves, right? Correct. So there's a sign that the ego's running.
Correct. And one of the really easy way to see if it is your ego is to recognize if you're projecting into the future and being afraid of or comparing yourself, not being good enough, or if you're in the past in very difficult things that have happened to you and you can't get out of your story. These are all constructs of the ego.
Right.
And let's talk about that word construct, because essentially the ego is our false self.
Right. It's the mask.
Identities that we take on, right? I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a wife, and we think that's who we are.
Right. Or we think I'm depressed, I'm not good with money, right? I'm not good at relationship. Right? We have all these beliefs, right? These limiting attitudes about who we think we are that we've taken on, right? They were kind of, we kind of put them on, like we talk about those layers and those masks and those, whether it's society's cultural conditioning or whether it's your own, upbringing and imprinting that happened as you were, developing along the way. But the ego's job is to keep that stuff intact. You have your story, and hopefully it's a good one, but usually it's not, really kind of goes, focused on that sort of disempowering negative sense of self. The ego's job is to keep that intact.
Correct. And it's going to always keep you less than, or I guess greater than, but even the people that are egotistical, there's really a very strong sense of insecurity under that, right? So they have to show that they're better than other people, which by definition is the ego.
And so when we're judging, when we're blaming, when we're complaining, right? I mean, how many, nobody likes to be around people who are constantly, I call it, we know people who live in a constant state of irritation. It's just become their personality, right? Because they're never they never allow themselves to arrive, right? There's always something more to be doing, or something should have been done differently.
Right. And they're not accepting what is, right? People who are constantly complaining about the weather or the car alarm or the dog barking, they're not accepting the fact of what is happening, and they're allowing that to make their experience be less than.
Yeah, yeah. And so, Lorna, the great story about the soup you just shared with me, I thought that was a good one. So why don't you,
Right. So if you're, this isn't to say that we don't speak up for ourselves.
Right.
So if someone's, if you're in a restaurant and you get served cold soup, it's okay to call the waiter over and say, the soup is cold, could you reheat it? But as soon as there's a story around it, oh, this always happens to me. What's the matter with this restaurant? I can't believe this. I don't have enough time for this. That's when your ego's gotten involved. The truth is that the soup is cold, and you just want to do that.
Right, right. So like my dog barking right now. Okay. Why does this always happen to me? He's picking on me. I can't believe this is happening. There's that story that we tell ourselves to reinforce, that we should be something different, that we're not enough, that something's wrong and it's my fault somehow, right?
Right. And, non-egoically, we're in trouble with our dogs. So chances are we should take a different action and maybe be somewhere else when we record. Wow. But again, we don't have to, just kind of what's happening to us right now.
We don't have the ego to run our lives. It keeps us living in, that place of a false sense of self. It keeps us being forgetting and cut off from the truth of who we really are in the world and how we want to show up,
Yeah.
So this is just one of those days.
And that's okay. And that's okay. And so, right. So we just want to talk about the ego today so that you can start to notice, when are you in the clutch? When is it all about what you need to do or achieve, or how you measure up to other people? How are you making yourself? And just start to think about this. And Christine, you and I have just both really gotten involved with Eckhart Tolle again, and he is the master of this. We would really recommend, looking at The Power of Now, A New Earth can be very helpful along this line about the ego.
Because in a nutshell, the easiest way to understand the ego and move out of it is to get into that present moment, which we talked about last week, right? So it's in that personal stillness and coming into that present moment that allows the ego to dissolve.
Yes, and the ego cannot exist if you are present. Being mindful, if you are in the moment, the ego dissolves. It's not there.
Yeah. So. Okay.
All right. We hope this is helpful. And we will be back next week with another Magic Monday.
Sounds great. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Bye.